Okay, you guys, fasting and cortisol. We get a ton of questions on this, and I know a lot of you are really trying to bring your blood sugar down. You're trying to bring your insulin levels down, and you're not succeeding at the level you want. So it might be time to think about your cortisol levels. So on this video, I'm going to show you exactly what you need to look at. Okay, Dr. Mindy here, and I want to continue our conversation on fasting and your hormones. So again, if this is brand new information to you, go back and watch the beginning of this series. The title of that video is Fasting and Hormones, and I explain something called the hormonal hierarchy. And the reason that this is so important is that when you guys are fasting or you're coming to the ketogenic lifestyle, what you're really focusing in on is you're trying to manipulate insulin, which is awesome. But then all the other hormonal imbalances start to show up. So for example, women over 40, as they go into perimenopause, menopause, postmenopause, they start to come to fasting to help with weight loss. They bring their insulin down, but then they throw all of their sex hormones off. So I'm going to do a whole separate video on that. We also see that when people come to fasting, they want to lose weight, but they can't because their cortisol levels are so high. So there is this hierarchy that we've got to follow and we've got to pay attention to if you want to get the great results that fasting and keto can bring you. On this video, what I'm going to do is talk specifically about cortisol, because we see this over and over again, not only in my clinic, but we're also seeing it in my Resetter Collaborative on Facebook. We see it in those of you that join us for Fast Training Week here on YouTube, that you struggle to get your blood sugar down. You struggle to get your insulin in balance, and a large piece of that is because of cortisol. So today I'm going to really address 3 different steps or 3 different things that we see that you need to keep in mind if you want to regulate cortisol and in order to bring insulin to a more regular place, to bring insulin down. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to this picture here. And the first thing is to understand where cortisol comes from. So cortisol is your body's secreting a chemical that is reacting to a perceived stress. So it's either you're having a stressful environment in your life, or sometimes it's internal stress, like you've got a toxic load that's going up, or we see cortisol go up when people go and work out, even something just as simple as working out. So cortisol will rise according to either an external stress or an internal stress, or sometimes both of those. And it's not just the adrenal glands that are secreting cortisol. There is a whole team of organs that are responsible for this cortisol secretion. And that team is what we call the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, or otherwise known as the HPA axis. So let's use you as an example. You walk into work one day, you're really happy, and then all of a sudden your boss slams a bunch of work down onto your desk and says, this is due in a couple of hours. When that happens, your brain goes, oh my God, how am I going to keep up with that? And it needs basically more energy, it needs more focus, it needs something to turn you into a superhuman so that you can meet that deadline. So what your brain does is it perceives the stress, it sends a signal to the hypothalamus and pituitary, and they go on and send a signal to the adrenal glands, and they say, give me cortisol. So in its initial phases, cortisol is really helpful. We're primitive, right? So cortisol was meant to be able to get us to run from a bear when we were in the cave person days. It was meant to get us to run when we were in a perceived danger. In this day and age, it's doing it all the time when you perceive a danger, that something like your boss putting extra work on your desk that needs to be done in a certain time period. So when cortisol gets secreted, your mental clarity improves, your energy improves. It's actually a beautiful thing. And when cortisol goes up, then blood sugar will start to go to the muscles, and your body will be able to move and go into action. Here's where the problem exists. So many of you are living in a day in and day out stressful world. And so what's happening is you're constantly calling on that alarm system of your body over and over and over again. And your brain is locked in fight or flight. And this HPA axis is never turning off. It's just all the time, more cortisol, more cortisol, more cortisol. Now, just like we can get insulin resistance, we can start to become, our cells can become resistant to cortisol. So when you have excess cortisol, what's going to happen is that cortisol has to go somewhere. So typically, your body will make fat. So that remember, all fat is your body is storing excess. It's just putting the excess toxins, putting the excess insulin, putting the excess cortisol in a place other than your organs. Because if it put it in your organs, it would be damaging your organs. So it saves your life by putting it into fat. So in order for you to start to regulate this insulin, you've got to come over here and regulate cortisol. So there's a couple of things I want you to know about the HPA axis. The first thing is this is meant to be turned on and turned off. So if you feel like you have a pretty good balance of stress, then like you have stressful moments in the week, but you're not stressed all the time, then my guess to you is that you're not struggling to regulate insulin. I bet you're not having trouble bringing your blood sugar down. But if you're somebody who lives a high stress life, like a rushing woman, you guys have heard me talk about rushing woman syndrome before, or you've had a trauma. I just did an interview this morning with wellness mama Katie Wells, who just lost 50 pounds over the last year. We'll be putting that Reset Our TV up here in a couple of weeks. And she struggled to lose weight until she healed the trauma. And what she really did is she healed the HPA axis so that her body stopped making cortisol. So if you're struggling to get insulin under control, you know you've had trauma in your life, then honestly, your job is not to fast all the time. Your job is to start to heal this HPA axis. The other thing I want you to know about the HPA axis that's really important is that oftentimes toxicity can throw this axis off. We call it cortisol dysregulation. And it basically means you're getting cortisol secretions at bizarre times during the day. And usually it happens at 2 or 3 at night because you have a mixed up reaction coming from your hypothalamus and your pituitary, which is in your brain. Most of the time, this has a toxicity issue. As toxins come up, then all of a sudden they settle into these parts of the brain because there's no blood-brain barrier. And so then they start to throw off this axis. So if you feel like you're stuck in that cortisol loop and you can't get out of it and you're fasting and you're doing keto and you're trying everything and you can't get this insulin to come down, I want you to pause on the fasting for a while. You can do the intermittent fasting, but I want you to just take a break and I want you to come over here and I want you to start to heal this axis. And you can do that through things like tools we love, the brain tap, and we'll put links in here. The brain tap pulls your brain out of fight or flight. Yoga, meditation, saying no to things like stop the rushing woman. Make sure that you're not go, go, go all the time. And then if you know you've had a deep-seated trauma, Katie Wells talked about things like tapping and EMDR and NET. There's some really good like therapy techniques that will help move you out of that fight or flight. If you're doing all that and you're still stuck, a lot of times it's a toxicity issue and you got to go in there and address your heavy metals specifically like to sit into the brain. So let me repeat that for a second. If you are struggling here, then you need to go here, and by regulating cortisol, you got to come over and regulate the whole axis. Okay, second thing I want to tell you about this whole process is that there are a lot of wonderful things that happen to you when you fast, especially the longer you fast. So a question that I get a lot from people is, well, if I fast, doesn't that raise cortisol? Well, it will in a short period. You get a short burst of cortisol. But there are other things that are going on while you're fasting. So, for example, the longer you fast, your ketones go up. Ketones will go up into the brain and they'll start to heal the brain. The more you fast, like 24-hour fast, GABA production starts to increase. Well, GABA is calming, so it's like instantly can pull you out of this fight or flight and can bring that cortisol level down. We also know that the longer you fast, when you go into especially longer than 24 hours, we see cellular inflammation go down. When cellular inflammation goes down, now you make those cells more readily available for the cortisol that is being secreted. So if you are really stuck in fight or flight, you're uber stressed out, chill out on the long fast, but you can still do the intermittent fasting. I think that's a great idea. But I don't want you to miss out on the healing benefits that fasting can give you. One of the things that I do with my patients is if they have adrenal fatigue, we'll just push them back, their breakfast back an hour. And I'll just kind of let them settle there and get used to that. And then when they're good there, we push it back 2 hours. And then we kind of settle and see how it does there. So we move people into a fasted state in a much slower way. So don't completely give up on fasting. If you know you have a dysregulation of this, just know you might have to do it at a slower pace than your spouse or your neighbor or your best friend. Everything has to be customized to you, especially when you know that you've got this dysregulation going on. Last thing I'll tell you, we have seen thousands of people fast. We have read thousands of blood sugar numbers in the Resetter Tribe, in my clinic, in my academy, and I see that person that struggles to bring blood sugar down, and they're so frustrated. And when they can't bring blood sugar down, what ends up happening is they become more stressed out. And that is not helping you. If that is you, that's where you're definitely one of those people. I want you to step out of the fasting, and I want you to come over and heal this access first. So that once this is healed, then when you step back into fasting, you're going to be able to regulate this insulin a lot better. So remember, cortisol controls insulin. So you need to keep cortisol balanced in order for your fasting to work. Okay? So don't give up on it. Just be smart about it. Acknowledge where you're at. Where do you sit with this access? Are you locked in fight or flight? Is stress coming and going in a natural way? That's great if it is. If you're locked in fight or flight, don't put yourself in a 3-day fast. Don't try these elongated fasts. Really dial in and heal this first, and then your 3-day fast is going to be so much more effective. Okay, so fasting and cortisol, I hope that helps. If you want more information on the hierarchy, just put menopause reset in the notes and I'll send you a digital copy of my new book that explains all of these hormones. But as always, I hope that helps.